Hey, welcome to Exposition, and on this episode, we're talking to Erin O'Neil, and she's had some interesting travels in the Far East and has written a book about it called Gui Ren. So stay tuned to Exposition. Glad you could stick with us. This is Mike Thompson, and I'm doing kind of double duty behind the scenes. And on the set, we have Valerie Thomas and Erin O'Neil. So we'll be splitting up this whole broadcast this time. So there they are.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back to Exposition.
I'm excited to be with you today.
Erin O'Neil.
Make sure your mic's on.
Oh.
Oh,
Green.
it's turned off on me. There, can you hear me now?
Very good.
Oh, I've got a voice now.
Erin O'Neil. Welcome to Exposition.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Mike is behind the scenes today, and I will be doing what I usually do, kind of watching the tennis match and putting in my 2 cents where I feel like it. But we're going to start off by saying we're going to have Bob Evans Farm Festival coming up, and the Artisan Shop and Studio will be there with blacksmithing and all the other arts and crafts and performances at Bob Evans Farm Festival, and all the delicious food. I'll wear my stretchy pants. So.
And this is the next to the last festival, I believe, because they went to make
We believe,
50.
yes.
So this is number 49, and so if you want to catch the festival, you better do it.
Right.
So, Erin, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came upon traveling, and how did the book come to be?
Absolutely. So I actually grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I have family from the Gallia County region, so my grandparents, Bobby and Charles Holzer, were here, and so a lot of my family ties stem to Gallia County, which is really exciting to kind of bring my work back home in a way to my childhood stomping grounds.
Yes.
So as I said, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I went to Upper Arlington Public Schools, and then I moved to Wellington, and at Wellington I had the opportunity to travel to Chile, and that really opened my eyes to the possibilities that were on a global atmosphere. So I started traveling in Chile, and I stayed with a host family, and I realized how many possibilities there were in terms of connections and adventures and new things to learn and challenges to overcome. And so after that trip, I went on a school trip to France, where I continued to stay with a host family and kind of immersed myself in culture there as well.
Right.
And then I just couldn't get enough. I applied to Butler University, which is where I ended up going to college. And I knew which study abroad program I was applying for before I even got into the university, because I was so dead set on making travel a part of my life. So I did a semester abroad in Europe, and then the opportunity arose to go to Shanghai, China for 6 weeks, which was the start of Gui Ren, because then when I graduated, I was invited to go back to China and continue my work with that internship coordinator.
Sure.
And the stories that followed and the adventures that came out of that was truly incredible. So this is a result of kind of my path as a postgraduate and as an individual that's very set on growth and development through travel. This is the stories and the relationships that have kind of resulted from that.
Right, and you said you originally went to China for a job internship, but decided afterwards that you want to become, which you are now, an author and a writer, and you do presentations and workshops, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like I said, I interned for this guy, and I continued to do remote editing work for him throughout the rest of my degree as I finished up at Butler. And in the winter before I graduated, I was kind of, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I was sitting in a coffee shop looking at all these different job postings and positions that I felt might interest me or might connect with me, and all of them connected, but for one underlying reason of I loved telling stories, and I liked making meaning out of everyday moments that we often miss sometimes because we're so caught up in routine, and so I really wanted an opportunity to explore that. And so when I got an email asking me to come back to China for 3 to 6 months and continue the work that I had been doing, I thought, what better way to spend the first 6 months of my postgraduate life continuing to connect with people and produce meaningful content that would help inspire others through videography and photography and design. And so I set aside my secure 401k path job, and I decided to move to China by myself, and I had a lot of wonderful support along the way.
Oh, thank goodness.
And I started to work for this guy, and unfortunately, and this is where kind of the book starts out about talking about the adversity that I experienced when I first moved there. Not only in not being able to speak Mandarin and moving to a foreign country by myself very soon after graduation.
Yeah.
Never having rented an apartment on my own, let alone in China.
Right.
So there was that piece of it, but there was also the piece that the guy that I had worked for had changed over the course of the year that I had not been there. And
Goodness.
the original proposal was that all expenses would be paid. I would go to up to 5 different countries with him, and we would continue to develop this interview series. And it was my dream job right out of college.
Yes.
But within 2 weeks, and actually it's funny, I was sorting through some emails the other day, and I found this email that I had written about how I was feeling so far in the trip. And within 2 weeks, I didn't have an email address, I didn't have an office key, I didn't have a desk, and I didn't have any of the equipment I needed to do my work, and he wasn't even in the country. So I started to feel a little bit uneasy. I started to wonder what I had done wrong, if I had done anything wrong, if I was just missing something, because I had gone in with this totally different expectation of what it might look like. And my gut reaction was right. Despite continuing to work for him for 3 months, because I felt it my due diligence to stick in there and try and produce work that meant something to me, it was a very unfortunately abusive workplace. I was repeatedly told that I could be replaced by not 1 but 2 Chinese women for the same price of $7 an hour.
Oh, good grief.
Which, if we take a minute and just reassess that, $7 an hour split between 2 people is $3.50 an hour. That's not much to live by even in China. And so...
What were you making?
I was making 7.
Okay.
But the rest of my paycheck was supposed to come from paid travel. And before I left the country, he had sent me an email that said, I have confirmed trips to Hong Kong, Singapore, and I think Taiwan. And so I went in knowing, all right, we're going to travel right off the bat. This is going to be great. And I got there and nothing was planned, and there was no intention of planning anything. And I was on a limited visa, so the reason that I even got to Hong Kong in the first place was because I said, look, you got to help me leave the country because my visa's going to expire and I really don't feel like being deported today. So,
Right.
So we managed to get to Hong Kong and Thailand, and there were up days and there were bad days. There were moments where I felt like things were turning around, and then there were moments where I knew that nothing had changed and it wasn't going to be any different. And so I came to a tough decision and realized that I had to make a choice. And my roommate at the time asked me 3 things. She said, I want you to think about your finances, your career, and your well-being. Is it helping any of those things? To which I couldn't answer yes to a single one of them.
Then
and so I realized that I had to change something.
Yes.
And of course, me being a new postgraduate, I felt like I had failed myself. I had failed my family and friends. I'd failed my university. I'd failed my high school.
Oh, no, he pulled a bait and switch on you.
Yes, yeah. Because like most things in life, it's not linear, both unfortunately and fortunately, because it set me off on an adventure that has changed my life since. I decided ultimately to stay in Asia, but I wanted to get to those places that he had promised we'd go, and I didn't get to with him. So I used $2,000 out of the $3,000 left of my savings that was meant to pay student loans. And I started traveling to Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. I went to the places that I felt passionately about going, and the people and places that I interacted with along the way are how this book came to be.
That's amazing.
So
and you
why-
just forged forward.
So why did you go to these countries? What were you looking for in those places? You know, what you went to China, and then you went to these other places. Why did you move around? Was it just to meet new people, or what?
I really wanted to see the countries that we had already been talking about. So I felt that I owed it to myself. You know, we'd gone to Hong Kong and Thailand, and the other countries that were mentioned were Singapore, Taiwan, and Malaysia. And so I knew that those were at least going to be on my list, because I owed it to myself and to the people who believed in me back home to make it there and see what was out there. And so along the way, I just kind of realized, well, I've also always wanted to go to Indonesia. I may as well just kind of loop down there. And I just looked at a map and said, well, that looks cool, that looks cool, that looks cool. And of course, there were certainly places where my parents were like, are you sure you want to go to Cambodia? Are you sure you want to go to Vietnam? But I followed my instinct, and I talked to other travelers who had been to those places recently and felt no fear in going by myself.
That's fantastic.
So I really wanted to go and experience life there and see the people and hear the stories. I mean, I knew right away that I was a storyteller at heart, and I wanted to collect those moments.
Yes.
Were there stories you were looking for?
No, and actually most of
Okay.
the stories I found, I think, are stories that I didn't realize could even exist, if that makes any sense.
Like, what kind of stories would you run across? So you weren't looking for a theme, in other words.
Right. So I set out traveling thinking I was going to go explore places. And actually, I think we have a picture of me on a train with a young Chinese mother. On my first adventure out west, I went out to the Gobi Desert. I went out to Dunhuang, China. And this was on my way to Xi'an. I met this lovely young mother who was sitting beside me, and I had gotten bored on the train, and so I started kind of watching her scroll through social media. And she was laughing at something at one point and sat back and saw me eavesdropping on her social media binge, and we started translating back and forth with our devices. And she told me all about her son and her history career and how she was headed to Xi'an for a history conference and what she's done in education. I watched choir videos of her from back home.
Wow.
And she insisted on trying to feed me, so much so that she literally handed me a half-eaten burrito and offered me a bite because she was just so concerned that this young, lonely traveler wasn't getting enough food. And as I got off the train, I realized how poorly prepared I was for backpacking because Xi'an was surprisingly cold and rainy. And so we were standing on the platform together, and she pulls this yellow silk scarf out of her bag. And she wraps it around my neck very lovingly, and this thing is not going to keep me warm. I mean, it's sheer. But as she wrapped it around me, I realized that there was so much more that she was giving me, and it was that gift of unconditional compassion. We could not speak English to each other. We had very little in common in terms of background, in terms of interests. I'm not a history buff. I wouldn't declare myself to be. We couldn't relate on a lot of different things, but we could relate to each other as humans. And those are the stories that I started to collect. And so Gui Ren is a written Chinese phrase that encompasses the right people coming into your life to help guide and inspire you. It's those people that you didn't even know that you needed until they come in and they help you with a problem, or they help you realize a new perspective, and they change your life because of that. And so the stories in Gui Ren are those stories of people who came into my life completely unknowingly, changing the direction of my path.
It's like magic, isn't
It
it?
is. It really is.
Yeah.
Is there a certain number of people that you had to narrow it down to in the book?
If I talked about
Like the
every
Dirty Dozen
single
or something?
person, yeah. Well, so it's funny because this book started out as an idea of just putting my blog posts into a bound book, and then I realized that there were chapters or stories that I wanted to elaborate on, and so it turned into a thick 350-page book instead, which I never thought I would be able to write. But the stories, because they were real, they were personal, they came pouring out of me.
Pouring
because
out of you.
It was a part of me now.
Yes.
and so I certainly had to limit it to people who I could really dive into their story and our connection. But there are people, I mean, there was a couple store employees who, when I went in to grab a snack, I might have mentioned them in the book briefly, but I went in to get a banana to eat because I was backpacking and crossing across this entire city from one train station to the other, so I had all my gear with me, and I was just kind of hungry and thought I'd stop into a fruit stand and get a banana, and they just looked at me starry-eyed, and they just were like, you can have it for free, it's a gift, you can have it. And it's like little things like that that remind you that remote city outside the Gobi Desert, and there is not a lot of English there. The woman in the blue cardigan, I walked outside of my hotel and this cafe walked me around to all the tables and pointed to all of her customers' food, and until I finally pointed at one that looked like something I might eat, and they just kept bringing out food. And so I ate breakfast there, I ate dinner there every day. They made sure that I had something that I enjoyed.
Good care of you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like a family away from home.
Yeah, and I think that's what Gui Ren is about. It's about connecting with people regardless of background. It's regardless of what you've experienced in your life, because we are all people. We are humans, and that should connect us more so than anything.
Right.
So I'd love to show you kind of the book trailer to kind of give you an idea of some of the people that I ran into along the way and some of the sites that I saw, because it truly is. Every location was a new experience for me, and every connection that I made was unique in the sense that we could tell that we had different things to offer. From one person I learned about trust, another person I might have learned about vulnerability, but they were all so unique. So I'd love to show you the trailer.
Okay, here we go.
Say hello. Hello.
It might seem strange to you, my friend, that some things are always heaven sent. The more you want, the harder it gets. The more you let go, the more you get. It's a crazy, beautiful life. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Nothing lasts forever. Someone told me so. Life is always changing, ain't what you think you know. Even if you're standing still, you're floating in space. So grab a hold of your heart and you'll find your place in this crazy, beautiful life. In this crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Wherever you are, whatever you do, whatever wishes might come true. Whatever you got, whatever you give, you make it a beautiful life to live. It's a crazy, beautiful life. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful life.
To the adventure.
Okay. I always ask people who have lived overseas, is there anything that you missed from here that you that you missed? You know, what did you miss you when you were there besides family? Because everybody misses family and stuff. You know, was it Taco Bell or something like that?
You know, funny enough, I still have yet to eat Taco Bell, and I didn't have Burger King until I was in a train station in Malaysia, and everything else was closed. I
was
also
gonna say
have
you're
not
not
had White
missing
Castle,
much,
so
but yeah.
yeah, that's what I keep being told is that I'm not missing much. So I still have yet to eat Taco Bell or White Castle. But
Yeah.
Burger King was a Malaysian thing. Now, of course, I'm scared
crazy.
that maybe Malaysian Burger King tastes better than American Burger King, so I'm
It
scared to go.
could. It could.
What did I miss? I mean, my first instinctual answer was I missed being able to communicate easily. But honestly, I think that not being able to communicate easily forced me out of my comfort zone in a way that was productive and meaningful to my experience and to who I have become since. Maybe driving, which is odd, I think. But if you've ever been in a Shanghai metro, you'll understand.
Yeah.
Although the Shanghai roads were not good either, especially, I mean, Vietnam traffic was insane. I was in Ho Chi Minh.
They just go where they want.
Yeah,
There's no
which-
rules. Just don't hit anybody, right?
Did you drove? You had an automobile?
No,
No.
not in Asia.
Okay, yeah.
Now I did bike places. They have a really good bike share program in all over Asia, but I used it to get to work every day and to get to the marketplace and the gym and things. And of course my mother was like, "Oh, you must be crazy. They don't even have helmets for you. Like that traffic is insane." But here's the thing about U.S. drivers versus international drivers. In most international countries, I find that traffic is completely unpredictable. Yes, there are rules, there are guidelines, but nobody really follows them to a T. But in a way that actually makes them safer because they are prepared for anything. Whereas when you live in the U.S., you are taught 10 and 2, you know, nothing's gonna, you know, don't swerve, don't, you know, there's all these don'ts, and we follow
Yes.
them, mostly.
Right.
And because of that, we're not prepared for unpredictability. And I think that
Yes.
that's a great metaphor for life, because if we stick on this one path, and when something comes out of nowhere and surprises you, you have a harder time handling it than if you are used to being immersed in chaos. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways of living abroad is the fact that if I am constantly in chaos, then I can handle anything. And one of the stories in here is about trust. I'll tease the book in that I got onto the back of a middle-aged Malaysian man's motorbike and rode off into a remote jungle.
That sounds safe.
Oh yeah, my mom loved that one. I didn't tell my parents until after I got back from
I bet.
Oh my goodness.
But he said something that has stuck with me and is a story that I tell regularly on stage. And he said, you have to trust in order to be happy. Trusting everyone risks heartbreak, but trusting no one guarantees loneliness. And that and being immersed in chaos is something that I've carried with me since. And I've realized that trusting others is so much less about trusting them to handle whatever you're giving them, and so much more about how you trust yourself with the outcome. So if I place my trust in you to get something done, I'm not putting you on the spot and making sure that you are the one who's doing it. I'm trusting you that if you don't do it to what I need, I can figure it out from there.
Right.
And so trusting people is trusting yourself to be able to handle whatever they throw back at you. And I think that is something that is so important for everyone to understand, because we, at the end of the day, we are the ones who can control our perspectives, what happens in our lives. I mean, the world is going to constantly throw ups and downs at you. My path has not been linear at all, and I really did think that it would be. I thought that I had all these extracurriculars, I had a perfect resume, I had a great grade point average, I went to a great university, I thought I was going to get an easy 9 to 5, well, maybe not an easy 9 to 5, but I thought I was going to get a standard 9 to 5, I'd start my 401k, and I would just be on this linear path. And I have not held a standard 9 to 5 job since I graduated, or a career. I haven't had a career yet since I graduated beyond publishing a book, which is arguably a career path. But when I graduated, I really didn't anticipate that I would spend the next 2 years, almost 3 years of my life, connecting with things and activities and people and places that would continue to form who I am today. And
You've been so open to it. You've been open to your experiences. You
Right.
haven't been just, focused on one thing. You've allowed this to form you. And,
Yeah.
and you were telling me earlier that you almost think you have like some addiction to learning.
Yes.
And that's okay, and people should be open to, other experiences, other people, other cultures, other, points of view, that, you might learn something.
Right.
Instead of just being so narrow-minded.
Yes.
Yes. So
And college, getting a degree is important because it teaches you how to learn. It teaches you to be resourceful. It's critical in knowing how to perceive and think about the world, not necessarily from one perspective, but being able to form your own opinions. And I think that, had I not had the education that I did, I wouldn't be able to be open to those learning opportunities and be vulnerable in an international environment. But I definitely think that too often we focus on point A to point B, and we don't think about all the other points in between that could totally throw us off that path, but lead us to something greater.
Right.
It was a childhood dream of mine to write a book, and I really, truly never thought that I would actually do it. I thought it was one of those childhood dreams that just, you kind of let go of over the years.
Because you didn't go over there with that purpose at first.
Absolutely
You came
not.
back with the idea.
Yes, and actually the idea wasn't even my own. I had been blogging about my experiences, and I was posting my blog posts online, and someone randomly commented and said, if you wrote a book, I would read it. And at first I thought, yeah, right, I can't write a book. My degree is in digital media production. It's not in English. It's not in writing. But on a 2 a.m. train to Singapore, I sat down and I started writing the introduction, and it poured out of me. I mean, these stories are so powerful. Truly, I wouldn't be who I am without the stories in this book. And the stories that are in this book are the stories in your life and everyone else's life around you.
And we can all relate to what you have experienced.
Yes.
We can all relate to it, and that seed was planted, and it's growing and growing, and you're learning and learning more and more, and want to share that. And you do presentations to share with everybody who can attend your presentations, what you've learned and where you want to go from there. What more do you want to learn? What other places do you want to absorb?
Yeah.
And
So where can people pick up the book at? Is it on Amazon? Is it an audio book? Or
It is
where
on
can you find it?
Amazon. I'm working on the audiobook, and I'm also working on an ebook. But if you go to www.onmylist.org, so I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list. If you go to onmylist.org, you can order a copy that I will send to you that is autographed. So Amazon doesn't totally personalize and allow me to have that connection with you. So onmylist.org is where you can pick up a copy.
And
Okay. So that was Erin O'Neil. That's all the time we have for now.
an artisan shop in Gallipolis, Ohio, also has copies.
Okay.
Just throw that in there.